Congress was able to get a deal done on the fiscal cliff, but they got a lot of grief for it because there was not this huge grand bargain that some had hoped for. Jim, now you tend to disagree. You think that they actually made a big step here. Why is that?
Yeah, I think it was huge what they did, because in the final hours what they did is they made most of those tax cuts that got passed back in the Bush era and made them permanent. They took the tax issue off the table, which means that the next debate has to be about spending. So, you know, for the next several years, it's unrealistic to think that a Republican House is going to be willing to come up with more revenues, and that shifts the focus to what has to be done on spending. So, yes, they didn't do the spending, but they just postponed the debate, and I think you have to think about this as it comes in many steps. The first step was to lock in revenues, and now to make real progress.
Are you happy with that level of revenues that they're going to get then?
Yeah, because
you don't see that taxes being increased for the middle class.
You know, for all our history, revenues have been about 18% of GDP, and that tells you the electorate really doesn't have a whole lot of stomach for much more than that. So, to me, you know, before we went into recession, we didn't have a deficit. That meant the revenues were adequate, and so what this does is it sort of says revenues are now off the table. If you really want to make progress on the long-term fiscal situation, it forces you then to start focusing on the spending. Now, nobody really thinks cutting spending today across the board makes any sense. So that means that you have to then start thinking about the real problem, which is figuring out a way to control the growth of healthcare spending. Because if you can do that, that's the main problem we have. If you can do that, that's a huge windfall.
Now, discretionary spending has increased significantly over the course of the recession, and that's part of the government, you know, helping to heal the economy.
Countercyclical programs. Well, and that's because of unemployment insurance and food stamps and disability insurance. There's a lot of stress.
How do we wean our way off of that?
Well, as the economy improves and unemployment comes down, you're going to see all of that beginning to disappear. And by the way, this is why the Congressional Budget Office, when they forecast what's going to happen in the next 10 years, it's why they show the deficit comes back down to something more sustainable. They have the same thing in mind that we all have, which is get the economy back to full employment, and a lot of this spending is going to go back.
How long do you think it takes till they get to a more full employment rate?
Well, my guess is another 5 to 7 years. This is a very deep hole that we fell into. It normally takes about 5 or 7 years, so it would not be shocking if it takes a little longer.
All right, so there you have it. Be a little patient out there, investors. We'll hear what Congress has to say not too long from now, and hopefully they come up with a good solution.